Tonight,
are you sure there are no more classified documents?
More documents, more questions. Even Democrats piling on after additional classified documents uncovered at the president's private home over the weekend.
We have asked for an assessment in the intelligence community of the Mar-a-Lago documents. I think we ought to get that same assessment of the documents found in the home of President Biden.
Plus, Martin Luther King's legacy in an unexpected place.
God is moving in France like never.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The document drama roiling the White House rolls on. Welcome to Faith Nation. From our studio in Washington, I'm Caitlin Burke. Tonight, the scandal over the president's handling of classified documents is growing. Over the weekend, more material was discovered at Biden's home in Delaware. That's in addition to the records already found in the president's garage, an adjacent room, and in the president's former office at the Penn Biden Center in Washington. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Matt Galka joins me now with the latest. Matt?
Caitlin, House Republicans want answers as at least 3 sets of classified documents have been discovered at the president's home and offices. But the White House says some of the information Republicans are demanding to be turned over doesn't exist.
Mr. President, are you sure there are no more classified documents?
Questions continue to swirl around President Joe Biden and the documents discovered in his possession after leaving his post as vice president. In addition to the documents, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer is also demanding information about who has been coming and going from Biden's Delaware home. Comer says the mishandling of documents could be a national security risk.
My concern is that the special counsel was called for, but yet hours after that, we still had the president's personal attorneys who have no security clearance still rummaging around the president's residence looking for things. We want to know the visitor logs to the residents. We want to know who had access.
The White House counsel responded Monday that logs don't exist for a private residence. Visitors are screened by the Secret Service, but no official log is kept. Republicans continue to compare Biden's document issues to former President Donald Trump's, recalling the high-profile raid of Mar-a-Lago as classified documents were taken from the residence.
Clinton mishandles classified information, they get Biden mishandles classified information, they get treated a certain way, and then of course President Trump gets his home raided 91 days before this midterm election.
Ranking Democrat on the Oversight Committee, Jamie Raskin, says the differences between how both Biden and Trump responded to their situations cannot be overlooked.
We were delighted to learn that the president's lawyers, the moment they found out about the documents that day, turned them over to the National Archives and ultimately to the Department of Justice. That is a very different posture than what we saw with Donald Trump, where he was fighting for a period of more than 8 months to not turn over hundreds of missing documents.
The president didn't address the questions as he spent Monday honoring Martin Luther King Jr. in Washington.
The path is clear. To go forward, we need to go together. So let's be guided by Dr. King's light and by the charge of Scripture, which is, let us never grow weary in doing what is right. For if we do not give up, we will reap our harvest in due time. Well, we're going to reap the harvest. Let's remember who we are.
The White House counsel said it would be referring all future questions to the special counsel appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland last week. Caitlin?
Thanks, Matt. Joining us now is Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Nathan, President Biden saw an uptick of his approval rating last week. Then the documents scandal breaks, and we have the White House in full crisis mode. How should the administration be handling this?
Well, I think they should be cooperating with any special counsel or those that are looking into the whether more documents exist and handling the whole thing. I think that's the contrast that the White House is trying to put up against former President Trump, is that they're being cooperative and former President Trump was not. It's still going to take some time to not only figure out exactly how many documents or how they were handled, but also whether this has an impact on President Biden's standing. You're right that he has gotten a little bit better, a couple of points better in his job performance over the past few weeks. And now it'll be a few more weeks to see whether this diverts the president from that trend and he starts to, trend downward.
The president's State of the Union address to Congress is scheduled for Tuesday, February 7th. Do you think it will be overshadowed by this document scandal?
Well, it's certainly going to be a part of the conversation. I mean, he's not going to mention it in his speech, but Republicans at every opportunity will probably bring it up. We have to remember that State of the Union speeches, will have dozens of items and issues that he's going to bring up, and there will be a lot of things to discuss in the meat of that speech. But this is news, and then this is what it's going to be a part of it. And Republicans want to hold the president accountable for it, and so it'll be part of the discussion. I don't know if it will fully overshadow that big speech, though.
This is the first time in American history we've seen parallel special counsel investigations into a former and current president, both of whom are likely 2024 contenders. Could this end with either of them bowing out or being forced out of that presidential race?
Well, we have to first see whether Biden officially gets in. I mean, former President Trump has announced. The short answer to this, Caitlin, is that I doubt that both of them will be the party nominees. I would be surprised if we have another Trump-Biden 2024 race. I think that one of them will either not run or lose in a primary. It won't necessarily, if one of them drops out or doesn't run, I don't think it will necessarily be because of the documents. With both Trump and Biden, there are multiple factors and issues going on. So this is a big issue. This is a big conversation topic, but it's also one of many things that are going to factor into a 2024 race.
All right, so let's switch gears here for a second and talk debt limit. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warns the government will run out of money by Thursday. If the debt limit isn't raised, economists say the U.S. government could default on its debts. Republicans want spending cuts. The White House isn't negotiating. Are we heading for another impasse?
Yes. It's just a matter of how long it drags out. I mean, this was clearly one of the sticking points in the vote for Kevin McCarthy to become Speaker. The conservatives and some Republicans wanted this to be the line for McCarthy to hold the line and demand certain spending cuts before allowing any increase in the debt limit. And so we'll see how far Republicans are willing to go, and it might break down to which party thinks they're ultimately losing favor with the American people. And it's not going to be clean and simple. So I think we are headed for some sort of shutdown. Whether we go to full default on loans or not, we'll have to see. But it's going to be messy, Caitlin. I will guarantee it's going to be messy here soon.
All right. Well, that deadline is Thursday, so we're going to know. Just a matter of days. Nathan Gonzalez with Inside Elections. As always, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Turning overseas, at least 40 people are dead and dozens missing after a Russian missile attack in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro. Rescuers continue to sift through what's left of a 9-story apartment building, now transformed into a mound of concrete rubble. This latest attack is considered to be one of the deadliest single missile strikes on civilians since the start of the war. More than 30 people remain unaccounted for. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin claiming positive momentum as Russia steps up its brutal fighting in the east. Religious freedom in America. Coming up, the importance of protecting and promoting the right to worship in the U.S. and around the world. As the nation celebrates Martin Luther King's legacy, today also marks National Religious Freedom Day. The effort to remember the constitutional right to worship comes amid a rising tide of anti-Semitism and renewed attacks against minority religious groups both in the U.S. and around the world. In recognition of the day, the White House issuing a proclamation on, quote, our right to practice, pray, and preach our faiths peacefully and openly. President Biden saying, quote, faith has sustained me throughout my life. For me and for so many others, it serves as a reminder of both our collective purpose and potential in the world. But for far too many people within our borders and beyond, practicing their faith still means facing fear and persecution. Today, let's recommit ourselves to ending this hate. Joining us now is Dr. Ralph Reed, chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Ralph, thanks for coming on Faith Nation tonight. This year, National Religious Freedom Day coincides with Martin Luther King Day. Do you think Dr. King would be happy about the current state of religious freedom in the U.S.?
I don't. I think that if you look at the various acts of persecution against Christians, against Jews, against those of other faiths, over 400 attacks on Christian churches documented by the Family Research Council, anti-Semitic attacks on synagogues and Jews at a record high, according to the Anti-Defamation League. And, you know, Dr. King was someone who spoke very eloquently, very openly, and courageously about his support for religious freedom for all believers, not just for Christians. And I don't think he'd be pleased. And I think overseas and around the world, the situation is even worse. You look at the arrest and execution of Christians. They have a potential death sentence in Iran and are not safe in many other parts of the Middle East, including in Turkey. You look at the arrest of Catholic Cardinal Joseph Zen last May in Hong Kong by the Chinese Communist Party and his conviction in November for aiding democracy efforts in Hong Kong. You look at the persecution of Uyghurs by the Chinese Communist regime. The United States shines out as a beacon of religious freedom and liberty compared to many of these other countries around the world.
When it comes to the work the Biden administration is doing to address some of this here at home, in that proclamation we mentioned, he touts the work his administration has done to ensure religious freedom. Why is it so important for our government to protect it?
Well, I wish that the record of the Biden administration matched its rhetoric, but that sadly has not been the case, both domestically and overseas. They have definitely dropped religious freedom as a priority in our foreign policy. When Secretary Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State, it was at the center of our humanitarian concerns because the Trump administration understood that religious freedom and political and economic freedom are indivisible. You cannot have freedom of economic and political life if you don't have the freedom to worship and to express one's religious beliefs and have freedom of religious speech. And so in the prior administration, it was at the forefront of our foreign policy efforts, less so under this administration, and I hope we can correct that.
The White House has committed $20 million. Last year, they committed $20 million to promoting religious freedom around the world. Is that a drop in the bucket when it comes to this issue, or at least a step in the right direction?
You know, it's both. It's a drop in the bucket. It's better than nothing. But I think if you look again at the threats to religious freedom around the world, you look at various rogue regimes, whether it's Syria, whether it's the Islamic dictatorship in Turkey, whether it's Iran, North Korea, China, many others around the world where religious freedom is not respected, where it's trampled upon. And the key is in every one of those cases where freedom of speech, including speech of a religious content, including expressions of one's faith, is restricted, you almost always and invariably have restrictions of other freedoms as well, economic, political, civil, and free speech.
All right, Ralph Reed with the Faith and Freedom Coalition, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Part house of worship, part community center. How one church is turning to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. to bring together Paris's diverse population when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. Today, Americans nationwide honor the everlasting legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. But his impact stretches well beyond our borders. In fact, one of France's largest evangelical churches is named after him, as George Thomas reports from Paris.
In a communist, socialist, and conservative suburb of Paris, a song of reconciliation and unity is rising. And with it, a message that's attracting people from diverse backgrounds.
I don't have to build a church. I have to build a place where people will be loved, will be changed by the Holy Spirit and by the power of God.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
French pastor Yvonne Caluire founded Martin Luther King Church here in Paris's Chrétien neighborhood after drawing inspiration from the civil rights leader's message of unconditional love.
Loving people as they are, and don't try to make them look like you are, but just love them and introduce them to a God who will change them.
Every valley shall be exalted.
Like Martin Luther King, Caluire says he too had a dream to create a space where blacks, whites, and people of other racial backgrounds could come together and reflect the diversity of Paris.
When God asked me to ministry, he asked me to be a minister in Paris area. So when I came, I realized that more than 50% of the kids in Paris area have an African dad or mother. So more than 50% of the newborn babies are mixed, and I love it.
Caluire's dream is now a reality.
We have now like 20% all black, 10% all white, 10% Asian, and 60% cannot be defined. Jesus color.
And that message of love shared across racial lines has been a unifying force for positive change.
This is what I think is the most touching and most extraordinary aspect of this church. Everyone is mixed. All cultures are represented.
I've been here since the church first launched, and to see how much it's grown is amazing. The work is enormous, and it's a blessing to many people.
MLK is now one of the country's largest evangelical churches, prompting French newspaper Le Monde to call Yvonne Caluire a rising figure in France's Protestant movement. MLK, which is about 7 miles southeast of Paris, is rather remarkable for its size. You see, in all of France, there are about 2,500 evangelical churches, and the average church has about 100 people. MLK went from 17 years ago to over 3,000 people today.
Sur ta confession de foi, je te baptise au nom du Père, du Fils et du Saint-Esprit.
During a recent weekend service, 76 people from different walks of life and racial backgrounds professed faith in Jesus Christ in water baptism.
And we haven't seen so many people coming to Jesus like now. God is moving in France like never.
Evangelicals make up just 2% of the population here, and their numbers are growing. A recent report found evangelicals becoming a majority within the French Protestant movement. Caluire says the pandemic led to even greater numbers as new people flocked to the church's online services.
We already reach more than 30 to 40,000 every week. And when you look at Google Analytics, we see what is very good, that a lot of non-believers are watching.
Because of the growth, Caluire says the church needed a bigger place to meet. So in September 2021, the new Martin Luther King space opened here in the southeastern suburbs of Paris. At a cost of $30 million, a foundation operates it as part church, part community center. And because of its community influence, Pastor Caluire says local government authorities were all too happy to chip in more than $3 million toward the building's fund.
That's why we can have money from the state, the government, the county, etc. They all give to the foundation. The foundation is the owner of the building, and the church rent the building.
Church services are held Saturday and Sunday in the building's 1,000-seat auditorium. The rest of the week, it's open to the community for rent. Companies have held fashion shows, car shows, and music concerts. Members of other religious groups have also held their events here. Caluer sees it as a model for people not typically drawn to a church building per se to be introduced to the gospel.
My goal for me is I want Jewish, Muslim, atheist, political, artists, all of them, they all need to be loved by God, to be transformed by the Holy Spirit, and to become loving of each other like Martin Luther King did.
In spite of its staunchly secular traditions, Pastor Caluer says God is on the move in France and takes heart in what he's doing in churches like MLK.
So now it's really a foretaste of heaven.
George Thomas, CBN News, Paris.
How to help from the internet's dad, the man behind the instructional videos taking America by storm, after this. Finally tonight, a man who makes do-it-yourself tutorial videos for people without fathers is warming hearts and teaching valuable lessons, earning him the title The Internet's Dad. Rob Kenny went viral nearly 3 years ago on his YouTube channel called Dad, How Do I? Today, Kenny has more than 4 million followers tuning into his videos on topics like how to fix a bike, unclog a bathtub, or even how to file your taxes.
My channel is for anybody and everybody to try to encourage and empower people, and I also do try to promote forgiveness because I think, you know, you got to forgive yourself, or if you can forgive other people too, because, you know, it's just not healthy to keep bringing the past into the future.
Kenny's dad jokes and fatherly wisdom keep people coming back for more instructional videos, but many say it's the heart behind these tutorials that makes the Internet's Dad so special. I like it. Great message and some practical advice. That's going to do it for Faith Nation. We'll see you tomorrow.